taking that step from mayor of Indio to running for Congress?
Yeah, definitely. So, the 25th district, it expands from Beaumont, Banning, San Jacinto, Hemet, and then the northern part of the Coachella Valley. So Desert Hot Springs, actually Cat City's also in there, Thousand Palms, Indio, Coachella, the East Valley, and then goes all the way to Calexico. So the whole Imperial County, and then you also bring in Needles and Blythe. But there's a huge amount of potential, right? We know that the people here are extremely hardworking, right? And we know that if we're able to just fill some of these gaps that are in our communities, we'll be able to just create a much better economy, provide a much safer place for our residents, start building out some of the infrastructure that's really needed to make our community successful, and deal with some of the underlying issues that we've always had in these counties and in this area. And so looking at that, we think that we're in the right place. We think that we're in the right, we have the right intentions for that position, right? And we think we have the right relationships to really make those connections and fill those gaps to make our communities just more productive, safer, and just provide a better quality of life for our residents here.
How would you help, like, if you get to bring like certain bills to the Congress floor? How would that help? Like, how would it work?
Definitely, like passing different legislation. So there's different laws, right? So there's going to be laws at the federal level, there's going to be laws at the county level, at the state level, and then at the city level. So some of the federal issues, with housing, let's say it's a huge issue for our community, right? And so some of those housing laws are very local, right? In Indio, we've been able to, help with developers and affordable housing. You see more construction coming out now with affordable housing developments out on Jefferson and 111. We just finished Campo, which got redone now.
Oh, I've seen that.
Hermosa now, so it's three different developments of affordable housing, and we actually rehoused all the farm workers that used to live there in those same houses, right? But then there's federal issues too, right? So some of that money actually comes from the federal government. And so they have to go through different regulations to pass, to get that funding. And so by working at the federal level, we can, make those funds more accessible to those organizations as well. And so there's different ways that you can help locally, but then there's bigger ways that you can help federally, right? In bringing those funds down. Like, one of the issues is when we look at, I don't know if you've seen the developments out towards like Mecca, Thermal, Coachella, where there's affordable housing that people can actually purchase. They're not apartments, they're homes that people can buy, right?
Yeah.
And so some of that funding was reserved only for rural areas. So you can only get that funding if you're considered rural. And now some of our communities are no longer rural because they're getting built out, right? And so our areas are no longer eligible for that funding. But if you were to change some of that language at the federal level, then you would open it up to more communities, right? So more communities are actually eligible to get that funding, and we would have affordable housing that you can buy, right, at affordable prices, just like we do in other cities around the eastern Coachella Valley, and expand that to different areas. Maybe that would be Desert Hot Springs, Banning, Beaumont, Indio, Thousand Palms. So.
Well, that's a good way to help people purchase homes, because right now the market, ever since 2020, just skyrocketed. Everybody leaving the big cities, coming to these sites, which is I guess the 25th district, the Coachella Valley, Banning, all that. So
definitely.
And I do like that approach of helping people buy their home instead of helping them get another apartment. Like,
it's the ownership.
The only help that the lower income people get is like, oh, you guys could pay less, but they don't own.
You don't build that wealth, right? You don't build generational wealth, but you're able to. I think they both help in certain ways, right? Because even if you have an affordable apartment, people are able to save, and let's say that money now they can invest into education, or they can invest into their business, or they can actually invest into our small businesses because they have more money to spend locally, right? And so I think that always benefits us when you're taking, especially when one thing that I want to look more directly at is who is buying all these properties, right? Because nationwide, one of the things that we're seeing is corporations going out and buying properties, buying the homes, and then renting them out to our people, right? And then so who's building the wealth there is the corporations. And we're just funneling more money. And as the rents get higher and higher, we're funneling more and more money out of our communities going out, and a lot of that money never comes back in, right? And so that's one of the problems that we see, is that's why our communities don't see as much investment because the properties are being bought out, and those even those rental funds aren't staying within our community. So how do we make sure, even when people are renting to our people, that it's more localized, right? It's not huge corporations that are renting out to our people, so that we keep more of that economy within our community.
How can you regulate? That's really hard to regulate on. Do you have to have certain laws or mandates or?
It is, but I don't think there's much of an effort now, right? So we got to start. We got to start somewhere, right? We got to start somewhere. And I think there are certain cities. I think Palm Springs actually did one where they have some kind of regulation there where corporations cannot own the homes. But then there's always those workarounds, right? Where it's like, oh, well, then I'll put it in this name, then I got this name, or make more companies and have different ways to go around it. So you're always...
It's not the same corporation, but it's the same people running it.
There's always different things that you got to put in, but keep up. But right now, I think the effort's not even there, right? So how do we bring that effort forward and start moving those conversations? And I think those are conversations that move across party lines, right? I think all communities can get behind something like that, in making sure that the homes in their communities are owned by families, right? By locals, and that economy stays within their communities.
No, I do like that approach because, it just feels like the gap has gotten bigger. Big corporations and every aspect of life, has been
definitely.
You could see it here in the community struggling, and we definitely see the hit in the economy, and we're like, it feels like it's only going to get worse. So I'm glad you're.
And that expanded during the pandemic too, right?
Yeah.
We saw that too. That a lot of our small businesses struggled more than the corporations did because of the way that we handled that issue as well.
Yeah, it's always the record profits that they were all cashing in, but then it's like you see your local stores, they're
shutting down.
They're shutting down. They can't even run their business. But big corporations, they never close. They were open. So could you take us back? Why did you want to run for Congress? Is that because when you were a mayor, you saw you wanted to help the community certain ways, and you're like, the only way to do it is if I take the step forward? Is that what? When did you have the idea for running for Congress? Is that just recently? Do you have a plan like a few years back? How did that outcome?
I think if you look at my history, right, I'm always one to take on really big challenges. I've always just felt that need. And when we see, big issues in our community, we just dive right in and get hands-on and tackle it, right? And so I think even before people have mentioned, are you moving up, or are you going to go to the supervisor, or are you going to go to state assembly? I think a lot of people were looking at me going towards the state assembly because my term would finish at the same time that our assembly member would term out. And but then, we've been building really good relationships within our community. And we feel that we have those right relationships to be able to step up into the federal government, right? And bring those community leaders with us. And with that, make a really good team out in DC and out here in the district that can take on those issues, right?
Do you ever consider, before going to DC, do you consider doing state assembly? Was that something that you guys entertained?
It was definitely it was definitely an option, right, that we would look at. But I think that would have been the easier move, right? But again, we're not here to take the easy moves, right? We're okay with taking the hard road, right?
Just go all the way straight.
I think I've shown that, even when choosing colleges, right? I remember in college, I had certain teachers tell me not to go to Stanford actually, because it would be too hard. Coming from Indio and going from an education at Indio High School to go compete with people that have been in private schools, right? And then going into chemistry, they were like, you're not gonna have a life out there, right? You're just gonna be studying it, and it's going to be really hard, and this is that. And we said, no, that sounds good. Yeah. if people believe that you can't do it, that's kind of that's where your goals should be sometimes, right?
Yeah.
It's not for other people to believe. It's for us to step in and say, we're ready for this. We know, we can compare ourselves to other community leaders, right? And people who have came before us, and we say, we have the right team, we have the right relationships, we have the right intentions again, we have the right education, we have experience. I'm going on my 6th year as a council member.
Yeah.
I finished my term as mayor. I think I did pretty well there, right? We got good feedback from the community. And I think that we're actually providing a lot of education within our community, which I think is a huge part of being a leader in the community, right? Bringing the community with you. And how do you bring the community with you? It's by providing education so that people know where we're going, and then providing engagement. So you can say, this is what's going on in our community. What are you seeing in your community that we can take into those decisions and help us make better decisions, right? If we're not doing that, then we're just in a little circle, right?
Yeah.
Going around with our ideas and leading kind of like from the top down. And for us, we lead together, with the community and being present there and building our relationships with community organizers, even with students, with the youth, right? With different residents that are involved, that are seen as community leaders, right? Even if they're not elected officials. Mm-hmm. There's different people around our communities that have the trust of our residents, right? And so meeting with those people and gaining their trust and getting a good working relationship with them and bringing them with us, right, on those issues and helping us solve those issues.
Do you ever consider, do you talk to your parents? Are you close with your parents?
Yeah, definitely.
What are the conversations?
Think I'm crazy, yeah.
What are the conversations like?
I remember what I told Mom. She was like, she just said, can you just relax? Ya
tumba tu rollo.
Because I just, again, going into really difficult issues all the time, right? And it's stressful for my family.
It's this is my next project I gotta tackle.
Yeah, because again, we don't really choose the easy road many of the times. And going into council, right? If you remember, I was 28 years old and I was still working in the cannabis industry, and people were like, "Yo, people are gonna light you up. They're gonna criticize you." And I said, "That's fine." But we're the only people talking about affordable housing at the time. And we saw that coming. And if you think about it, 2017, the housing issues weren't as bad as they are now, right?
Yeah.
We were at the council in 2017 talking about affordable housing, and we were getting ignored. And that conversation just wasn't happening. And so we stepped in and we said, hey, we're gonna do this. And people were like, hey, you're really young, you don't have experience in politics. I said, we're the only ones talking about the issues that our community wants to tackle. We're gonna get it. We're hardworking, we got people organized, we're educated. We're not there's nothing wrong about that.
Yeah.
And people, I don't know, some people just didn't believe at first, right? And then once we got the ball rolling and we got the conversations going, it just snowballed, right? And you saw that ripple effect happening throughout our community. We ended up winning over 60% of the vote with only $8,000.
Wow, that
is really low for a local election here in Indio, especially, right? I just had somebody ask me yesterday. They're like, "What does that cost? Like $50,000 to $100,000, right?" And I said, "Well, we won it with $8,000." And they said, "Oh, dang!" But it's because of that grassroots, movement and getting with those community leaders and hearing people out directly, and really diving in and being close with the community and being able to understand what's going on and find those gaps, right? Okay. This is what's going on, but let's look at all the details and okay, what rules are the ones that are stopping us, and how do we flip those rules? How do we make those little changes that are going to open up more opportunities in education, in home ownership, in land ownership, in small business? One of the things that we saw when we came into Indio was that community engagement was really low, right? People didn't even know when the meetings were, who their leaders were, what decisions were being made. And so using our social media to reach out to people and say, and put it in plain language. Right? If you send the agenda out and it's pages and pages and pages and tiny little writing and really complex language.
Well, the biggest thing that I saw was reaching the Spanish community, talking Spanish, because, I don't know, 70% of the people that live on this side, all the workers that work the hotels and other resorts. And the Coachella Valley is known for a big, retirement or the golf courses, or just like a vacation, but who handles all the behind the scenes, who cuts all those golf courses, who cleans all hotels, all the resorts, who works at all the restaurants, all the community that lives, they all live mostly in Indio, Coachella, this side of town, and they all mostly speak Spanish. So I think since you got in, you were the first one I ever saw reaching people in Spanish, and I thought that was really big.
Yeah, and even in the city, we actually had to fight for a good year to get translation for our agendas. So now those agendas that come out in English and Spanish, right? And now you see our marketing now too that comes out in English and Spanish. And what's that doing? It's getting more people involved. So during the pandemic, we actually had the daycare workers who were working daycares within their homes. come out and say, hey, we want to be eligible for these grants that are coming out from the city. And at first people were saying, oh, well, only people who have a storefront, like who have a building, because they have bigger expenses with rents and things that they had to change within their businesses, those should be eligible, right? And they came in and said, hey, we need some help too, because we actually have to hire more tutors, because now these kids aren't just in here after school, they're here all day, because there is no school. So now we're handling all these people all day. We need tutors to come in. We need, the teachers' assistants to come in. We need to make adjustments to our air conditioning, to our windows, to get airflow going through because of the pandemic and all this stuff. And so they came in and they only spoke Spanish. Most of them only spoke Spanish. And because we were reaching out and we were able to handle those conversations in Spanish, we were able to make those adjustments and actually provide funding to those daycare providers, right? So that's just a small example, but I think we also see, even like in the food truck park, right? We see more Spanish-speaking businesses going through these processes, the legal processes of starting those businesses and getting the health permits, right? And just being able to engage with our city as far as business, as far as community engagement, giving feedback. And I think that's extremely important, because even in Indio, when you look at the census, it says that 50% of our families speak Spanish in the home. And so we know that their strongest language is Spanish, right?
Yeah.
And if we're providing the agendas in only very complicated English, then we're losing 50% of our families in that conversation for the most part, right? Unless they have somebody there to help them and everything. So how do we make that easier for them to get information, to get involved, to start their business, to get into the city, to get resources from the city, right? To find help, whatever it is. And just have them, it's about equality, right? Providing equal opportunities for the people all around us. If we know that all these families speak Spanish, then we can provide that funding to provide that, translation and make sure that we're getting better opportunities out there.
Yeah, it's just common sense. Like I said, what you said earlier was making it accessible and easy for people to understand, and being able to be in their language first would be the biggest step. And then now moving forward to what you're doing as your next step, do you continue to, you're going to do the same double down on this Spanish, English messaging, and or what other ways do you want to reach communities that are just not being reached?
Yeah, I think, the first part is being present in those communities, right? Being there in community events to be able to get that feedback directly from people, meeting with those community organizers. So I was just telling you before we started, I was out in the Imperial Valley all day yesterday, right? So we stopped in Brawley, went to an event, met some community organizers there that are already doing some of the work there and hearing a lot of feedback. And then we went to Calexico, met with some other community organizers. Then we went to Old Central, met with some other community organizers, went to another event. Then we went back to Heber and went to another community event there where people were gathered up, right? So going into those spaces and having those conversations and getting feedback directly. But then I think the other part is using our platform, right? So we had the federal platform, and at that point, at the federal level, you have a full-time job and you have about 15 workers with you. So you have a whole team that's able to provide that community engagement, that education, right? So to me, bringing that education at the federal level, whether it's the Salton Sea issues, whether it's housing, whether it's immigration, whether it's lithium, the lithium extraction that people were expecting to happen
at the
Salton Sea. So all those issues, like how much does our general population know about those issues?
Probably not that much.
And how much are we learning from the federal government, right? And so we see that gap there, that we need more community education, more community engagement, so that people are aware of what's going on, so that they're ready to either participate, whether they might be opposed to what we're going to do, and we need to hear that. So let's be specific about what's going to happen and what the community thinks about that, so that we know if we're moving together with our community or we're working against our community, right? And what we decide should make sense to our community, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to provide those explanations so that we're better equipped, so we're all on the same page, right? That we have this huge issue at the Salton Sea. How is it being tackled? What's going on? And so some of that we're actually doing,
What's the latest on the Salton Sea right now? Do you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So right now, actually, one of the things that we saw that just happened was a deal, because the Colorado River is drying up, right? There's not enough water to keep using as much water as everybody's using. And so now you're seeing deals that are having to be made with all the different states on who's going to cut what water out of their systems. Everybody has to pitch in, right? Everybody has to cut back some. And what we saw recently was the federal government paid $250 million, but they're also cutting back more water from the Salton Sea and from the farming communities. And so some of that money is going to go to the farmers to pay them for not growing their crops. But it's also going to cut, the first year, I believe it's 100,000 acre feet of water, and then 3 years, 250,000 acre feet of water, which means that the Salton Sea is going to dry up even faster. And our question is those $250 million really going to help with those impacts? Because those impacts are pretty big, right? And so we're going to see the Salton Sea actually start drying up faster if we don't stop using so much water in other areas, right? So I think the stuff that's being done by the county and the state at the moment, they're building out different marshes around the area because they need to keep the ground wet. The problem is, the big health risk is the dust that comes up from the Salton Sea, right? So as the lake dries up, you have a lot of dust that's drying up there that has different chemicals, pesticides. A lot of the wastewater that comes from the farms ends up there, right? So for over 100 years, there's been wastewater going into that sea from those farms. And now as that sea dries up, those chemicals, it's saltier, first of all, because as water evaporates, the salt doesn't evaporate. So it gets saltier and saltier and less stuff is able to survive. But you're also drying up those areas on the outside, and now those pesticides and other chemicals that are in there are exposed to the wind. The wind will pick it up and take it to all the communities around the Salton Sea. And that's why you see one of the highest asthma rates in the country around the Salton Sea, and different, other issues, respiratory issues in that area. And so, the plan with the marshes is how do we start covering up some of that land with water projects so that the dust doesn't keep lifting up. So the 10-year plan, I think by 2028, it's expected that 60,000 acre feet of land will be exposed, and that plan will cover about 30,000 acre feet, so about half of it. It'll cover half of the land that's going to be exposed by 2028. That's expected to be exposed by 2028, but you still have the other half, right? And so now that's the short-term plan. That's like a 10-year plan. The long-term plan is still being discussed by the Army Corps of Engineers. So they came in, I believe it was last year, and they're going to do, I think what it was is a 3-year study. And so after that 3-year study, I believe what's going to happen is that they have to come into an agreement with the state on what has to happen there. But that study would also bring a lot of funding. I believe it's 2/3 of the funding for the project, which 2/3 of funding for this project could be billions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. So that's the good news with that study, that hopefully it'll come with funding for a long-term solution. What that long-term solution is going to be, we don't know yet,
They're
right?
talking about
is
it,
there going to be desalination? Is it going to be bringing in water from a different area? Is it going to be bringing water from the coast, right, and building a pipeline? That's seen to be really expensive. One study showed that it was like $80 to $90 billion, but there are community groups that are pushing for that, right? How do you build a sea-to-sea pipeline? And then a lot of government organizations are saying that's too expensive and unfeasible. We need to find another way to do this, right? When I think about that, I think the only actual way to provide clean water to that area is to stop using so much in our cities, right? In our areas out here. The reason that the Salton Sea is dry, so the Colorado River comes down, right? And it'll either go to the coast in Baja. Historically, it would either go to the coast in Baja, or there would be silt that would build up, like block it, and it would change direction and go to the Salton Sea. And it would change direction over hundreds of years.
But it was natural, right?
It was natural.
Yeah.
It would fill up the Salton Sea, then it would go to the coast, and it would fill up the Salton, and it would change course, right? And that's why you see all those lines in our mountains, right?
Yeah.
Where those water lines are at, that's how full it used to be. And so why did it used to fill up so much? Because we weren't using all the water. Right now that we're using so much, from all the way to the top, all the way down to California and Mexico and Arizona and all these other areas, we're using so much that hardly any water is making it to the Salton Sea or to the coast. And so unless we stop using so much in our cities, then there isn't going to be any water to flow into those areas, right? And so that's really where it's at. It's water. To me, it's more water conservation.
Do you ever get scared of just like having to deal with so much? Or is that just like part of the challenge that you said is just excited? Like, nah, like I want to tackle the biggest challenges that we possibly can. And we know that with the right team and the right research, we're able to move the ball forward. Or do you ever get scared?
No, I think we always do the best we can, you know, and so far I think our community's been giving us good feedback on those efforts. And so I always look at it too, though. If I'm not the best person and there's somebody that comes along in 2 years and I think that they're going to do the job better than me, I'll get behind them and I'll endorse them and I'll step out the way, you know, maybe be on staff or move on to something else or something.
Yeah.
But it's not about me being there, right? And that I believe that I'm the best person, that I have to do this. Right now, I think I'm the best option, right? It's all about what options does our community have, and we're giving our community another option now and saying, hey, look at what we've done in Indio, look at the community relationships that we have, look at how we work. If you believe that we're the best person there, then we're all for it. If you don't, and you decide not to vote for us, that's fine with me. We'll keep doing what we're doing here, right? But we want to give the community that option and say, hey, we're ready to take on these issues. We're ready to go to DC and handle these different conversations at the federal level. We're in, right? Our name's in there. You can vote for us. If you have confidence in us, we're ready to go.
And also, speaking of the federal level, there's a lot of issues right now going on with a lot of international wars and things. Like, I know because I talk to a lot of locals and just follow a lot of locals, and we see people don't want, or we just don't want people, you know, dying, you know? And then it's like we're funding basically these wars happening. Is that something that you guys are gonna try to bring voice to?
Definitely. And I think
to the federal level?
If you look around the community now, right, who are the elected officials that are talking about this issue? If you can think about in the Coachella Valley, who are the elected officials that you hear talking about the war in Israel and Palestine? Can you name a few?
No.
It's just me.
It's just you?
There's a few other people that are starting, you know, to get into that conversation. But this is an extremely difficult issue to tackle again. And a lot of people will just step back or just fall with what the federal government's doing, right? And for us, you know, we put in a little bit of studying. We talked with people from Palestine. We talked with people from Israel and try to get that feedback in. And we decided to get into that conversation. And that is, again, not an easy task. We've been taking a lot of heat from all sides for that, because for some reason people don't want you to talk about it, right? But we know that it's an issue that affects our communities here very deeply, and the communities out there, right? To me, human rights has always been a huge factor, right? That gets me more politically motivated, because human rights, the way that we treat other people, always impacts us. It always impacts us. The things that happen to the immigrant community during Obama's presidency and during Trump's presidency, and even now, affect all of our communities, right? The wars that we went to in Afghanistan and Iraq, what impacts did they have on our friends that were going out to those wars, right? And them coming back with all those issues with PTSD and their families now having to deal with that for years or for the rest of their lives, right? And so to us, it was really important that we didn't think that the conversations that were going on were at the right intellectual level, right? So we felt that we needed to start bringing in different options for our community to look at and say, hey, this is not the only way to handle this. Going and killing all these children out there and innocent people is not the only way to handle this. And there's more historical context that needs to be had here, right? And so we decided to go into those conversations and start talking to our community from those areas or not, right? And saying, hey, is this really where we want our money to go? Is this really how we want to handle this issue, right? When we heard in the very beginning, what really concerned me was that we were hearing leadership from Israel talking about the Palestinian civilians and saying, you know, we're going to wipe them out and they're all, you know, terrorists and this and that. To me, already had me thinking, this is going to be more of a genocide, right?
Yeah.
When you're talking about wiping out a population, that's never a good sign. When you're hearing that from the top level leadership from the country, right? And that's when we're like, we need to start putting restrictions on whatever we're going to be giving Israel to make sure that this goes in a more peaceful direction and not just let them do whatever they want to do, especially with Netanyahu in that government, right? We've seen his history. We know that he's, escalated things in the West Bank, and even now you still see that escalation happening of trying to take more villages, right, and taking homes from people, and it's a different type of violence that's been happening there for a long time against those Palestinians. At the same time, how do we hold both of these countries accountable, right, for their actions against civilians? And so in one side, we're condemning those attacks, and on the other side, we're funding them, and we're providing the weapons. And there's a lot of war crimes here. The international community agrees already that these are war crimes, and we're still going in and funding those, right, and not providing the right restrictions on those weapons. And so to us, we see that these just isn't the way that we should be handling this, right? And we know that we already see it impacting the whole region, and we know that it risks the safety of our soldiers, it risks the livelihood of our military families, it risks our national security, and it risks our national economy, because so much more of our money is going to these wars again. And the more this escalates, the more our money is going to be going over there, the more soldiers that are going to be involved. And so we really want to get into that conversation and bring more of the peaceful negotiation side of it and just more reason, right? Like, how many people feel like this is the right way to go, right, in our community? I don't think people agree with it for the most part, right?
No.
A lot of people won't say anything because you get attacked for even just talking about it, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen that a lot, right? And we've seen how that happens. And I'm willing to take that. I'm willing to take it. If we're the only ones that are going to be talking about it, if our federal representatives don't want to speak about these issues, then we'll jump in and fill that gap. Again, we saw that gap in education, right, on what's going on. And we just jumped in and filled it. That's not my job. It's not my job to be talking about these federal issues, right? But if there's the gap
no one
there,
else is talking about it, and you got to bring the information to people. And that is true, though, because at least we want people in our community to be better, to have better opportunities. And then you see the federal government giving, hundreds of millions of dollars just to fund wars that at this point, it's just a genocide. They're leveling, cities, and it's not only affecting, of course, the people that are killing directly now, but what are the future generations? So those children that grow up without family members, traumatized, they're gonna grow up with no food. They're getting starved. They have no internet access. It's just like they're getting displaced, and there's nowhere to go because the other countries around there don't want to open their borders either. So it's like, we're all just watching it happen in real time, and we are funding it directly through the federal government is funding it in some way. So it's just...
It's a lot of war crimes on different levels going on there, and the international community is watching us do this. And so what does that do with our relationships with other countries, the trust that we have with other countries? And it's been part of our history for a long time, right? So we see the need for that change now, and being able to treat countries with equality too, right? And saying, hey, we're not supporting war crimes here, but we're also not supporting war crimes here.
It's transparency. I think the internet has brought so much to light because, 10, 20 years ago when the Iraq war was happening and all this, it's just what we're getting from the television. This is happening. It's our team against their team. And this is what we need to do to protect our freedom or whatever. They use these things. And we, as a community, you're worried about, feeding your family, working, make sure your kids have some stuff for school. We don't ever, look at because we're trusting that our representatives are going to be doing things for our best interest. But now that we have the part of the internet, you could see movements starting now. Like in 2020, people started doing movements. People see the power of what it is, the power of the people together. We could bring some change and we could make our voices heard. Yeah. But it does take people that want to bring that to light, because we all consume, but no one ever puts out or shares the information with more people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're right on the fact that the video, is really changing things, because now we're able to see directly in real time what that starvation of 2 million people looks like, and what the bombing of all these innocent civilians looks like, right? Before, maybe we would get pictures from these other different wars. Now we're getting real-time footage of what's going on, and we know that it's not the same thing that the government's telling us, right?
Yeah.
And so we see those gaps, and now we're able to address it a little bit better, I think. And having that video and those reporters, I mean, the work that those guys are doing is incredible. Like the fact that they're out there, you know, able to even film all these things, and able to do it day after day for 3 months, right?
Just risking their lives every time they're out, every single second.
I think it's over 100 journalists that have been killed already in that area.
And then like some of the images.
Imagine the impact on their mental health, right? Seeing all those things happening to your people, and you're right. You know, do we really think that's going to make a more peaceful region there? Having all these tens of thousands of people lose children, mothers. You have kids growing up missing limbs now. Do we think they're going to be friendly to Israel and the U.S. in the future, right? And so is this really what was the best way to handle this? And that's where I disagree with the route that we've been taking, right?
Yeah, and of course, we all agree we don't want nobody hurting civilians. You know what happened October 7th as well.
Yeah.
Like that's just, it sucks that we're so advanced as a species, but we're still so act like cavemen sometimes, you know? Definitely. But yeah, there's gotta be solutions that don't require killing and displacing 2 million people. There's definitely better ways to approach that. And yeah, I've seen that the U.S. is getting more pushback from the international community. Mm-hmm. I think South Africa and I forgot who else.
South Africa filed something with the international criminal courts, claiming genocide against Israel. So they're going into those international legal proceedings now.
Yeah, there's got to be some pressure, and of course, you know, I think the people.
Why South Africa?
I know that's kind of why is it?
It's because they used to have
the apartheid system, and they see it, and it's so crazy to me that it's 2024 and we still have to deal with just mass genocide and stuff. But and for you, you're getting a lot of people. Any negativity towards you speaking out? Have you seen anything online?
Which is okay. You know, we know that when we get into difficult issues like this, where it's very polarized and very volatile, right? And especially knowing that, you know, people from those communities have lost a lot of people. And so I always try to be very cognizant of that too, right? And keep that in mind, that when I'm talking to some of these people that might be very angry at the things that I'm saying, these people have lost family members, right? Or people close to them and stuff. So I also don't, you know, go back at them or like, you know, start arguing with people around that stuff. Like, hey, I'll give people their time to, like, they have their certain emotions that they need to get out, whatever, right? But then when it's people trying to silence us, that's when I have an issue with that, right? It's like, no, we don't need to be silenced.
Yeah.
And we don't need to be, you know, college professors in this material to get into this conversation, right? We're educated. We know people from this region. We've talked to different residents here, and we know the impact this has on our community, and we're ready to get into those conversations and lead us in a better direction.
How do you deal with negativity? How do you deal with, just as a human, like, oh man, like you're getting maybe negative articles written about you or hit pieces or anything that's been happening since you started running for Congress? How do you deal with that as like your own, as a person?
I think you have to be open to criticism, right? But you also have to be mindful of what criticism you're taking in, right? If somebody has a good argument against something that I'm going for, I sit down and I listen and see what I can learn from them and what I can take to make my argument better, right? But then there's some times where it's just lies and stuff like that, and that's when I'm like, not dealing with it.
You don't even entertain it?
I don't even want to acknowledge it, right? I don't want to give it any more exposure than it already has.
Yeah.
And so if it's false, you know, not credible, if I know my community is not going to fall for it, right? I think our community kind of knows us pretty well, right?
Yeah.
And so they know what we do. They know how we work. If they hear like things that are way out there about us that are definitely not true, I have confidence that they're not going to pay too much attention to it, right? But if it's more of something that's a real criticism and it's like, hey, something that impacts, you know, the decisions that we're making to our community, and we think it actually is a good argument, then we'll sit down with those people and learn from
analyze
them.
And
yeah, man, this criticism is the best thing you can have sometimes, right, as a politician, because you're going to get plenty of people, especially if you're in high position, that are like, oh, no, you're doing a great job, or like, you know, you're doing good. I want to find the people that are telling me, hey,
you're doing this wrong. You
yeah,
be doing,
don't do this, move this way, or watch out for this, right? Be careful with this one. And I'm extremely open to criticism. Yeah, I actually sometimes enjoy the criticism more than the just people that agree with you, right? You got to find people that disagree with you, but you got to find people that are smarter than you that disagree with you, right? Not people that are just throwing stuff around or trying to cause drama or nothing like that. If it's drama stuff, I'm like, yeah, I'm out. Sometimes I'll see like screenshots of like stuff people send me that people are saying online. And I kind of laugh for like a few seconds and I just put it away and keep working, right?
Yeah.
Because to me, you know, seeing that my opposition is going into those kind of conversations while we're going into these types of conversations, how do we help our people? To me, that conversation is always going to win out. The ones that are always focused on helping the community and building a better society will always win out over the people that are trying to tear you down, right? For negative reasons, whatever it is. So just stay focused, be open-minded to different conversations, you know. When we were talking about the war issue, I actually met with different organizations that were opposed to my view. Mm-hmm. I gave them 2 hours of my time. And some of those conversations were pretty heated too, right? But we had a respectful conversation, listened to their perspective, actually took a lot from those conversations and learned how to make my arguments better, right? And more representative of both sides of that conversation. And so to make sure that we're being respectful to all parts of our communities, right? But also providing representation for everybody that's here, right, in our community. Yeah.
That's really, I don't know, that shit excites me too. Like getting I think that's part of throwing yourself out there. You're gonna get criticism and learning from those critics and having those conversations, uncomfortable conversations with people, because you want to hear all sides. You know, you're hearing reports from one thing, you want to hear what the other side is thinking. Then you come up with like the best solution that could solve most of the problems. Of course, nothing is as easy. Everything's super complex. Yeah. But I do appreciate your approach. What about, so how could people get involved in your campaign? How can people help you out if people have more questions or just anything to do with this 2024 campaign?
So definitely the main part is voting, right? So making sure people are ready to vote. It's going to be March 5th. This year, ballots will be coming directly to your home, so you can just mail it in from your home, right? And we'll be putting out educational videos on how to do it the right way to make sure your vote gets counted, right? But also, we have our Instagram at Oscar for Congress. We have our website, oscarforcongress.com. People can go to our website, they can help by donating, they can sign up to volunteer. If people are looking for an internship, they can sign up for an internship through the website. They can learn more about us there on the website as well. Following us on social media is probably going to be the more like up-to-date stuff, right, coming out. So you can learn about the events that we're having, canvassing events, you know, going door knocking, seeing what we're up to, seeing the different conversations that we're bringing up with the community. So I think that'd be the best ones, right? And definitely spreading the word, right, to the people. We know that, you know, if I pay for somebody to send a text to you, it's different than if your friend talks to you about this, right? So when people get the information coming from a trusted source that they know, a friend or a family member or a coworker or something, it's more effective that way, right? So one of the best things that people can do to help us out is spreading the word to their family, to their friends, to their coworkers, sharing on social media. If your community hears it coming from you, it's a lot more impactful than if it's just coming from me and they don't know anything about me, right? Yeah. And so that's one of the things that we ask people, you know, to help spread the word, let people know that the ballots are coming probably middle of February. The voting election day is going to be on March 5th. And then so if we make it past the top two, we got to get in the top two in March. If we make it in one of the top two spots, then we'll move on to November. Okay. Yeah. So that's the goal right now, March 5th.
March 5th, okay.
Top two, March 5th, that's the goal right now. And then after that, and that also opens up more of an opportunity for us because we came in kind of late in the game on this election cycle. We came in at the very end. And so if we make it past March, the endorsement process opens up again. Yeah. And now we're going to be able to get into those conversations with, let's say, the unions, the teachers union, everybody else, right? And say, hey, we're here. You're able to endorse us, support us, volunteer with us, and hopefully we can get some more of those endorsements in after March. and flip some of those organizations, get them on our team, and make it into the November election.
Okay. No, well, Oscar, thank you for your time, and no, we'll continue to help you spread the message.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate everything you're doing, and we definitely have our support wherever we could help. So make sure you guys hit up Oscar for Congress, go on the website, donate. We need as much help as possible, and spread the word, because we're in good hands.
Thank you for the good conversations. Always a fun time here, so appreciate it.
Thank you, bro.